Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar on maternity leave regulations and supporting pregnant employees. I'm Hannah Boo, Content and Communications Manager here at MorePay. We'll begin with some housekeeping. We have got a lot to cover today, so I'll keep this quite short. In terms of the agenda for this morning, Linda will start off by taking you through an employee's entitlement to maternity leave and pay. She'll then cover the importance of carrying out a health and safety risk assessment for pregnant employees, and she'll also discuss reasonable contact and keeping in touch days. She'll then delve into the payment of bonuses and how to handle pay rises whilst an employee is on maternity leave. And Linda will also run through maternity protection in a redundancy situation. And finally, she'll discuss some of the common pitfalls and how to avoid them. And as usual, we will be having a Q&A session at the end of the main presentation where you'll have the opportunity to ask Linda any questions that you may have. In terms of how to ask a question, you may have noticed that your microphone is on mute, but we do still want to receive all of your questions, and you can drop your questions into the question panel as shown on the screen here. We've had nearly 1,500 people register for the webinar this morning, so I imagine that we will get lots of questions, but we'll do our best to run through as many of them as we can at the end of the main presentation. And also, don't worry if you do face any technical issues this morning. We will be sending out a recording and also a copy of the presentation this afternoon, so you will have that to refer back to. And you can see the audio settings here if you want to just take a moment to familiarise yourself with those. Before I do hand over to Linda, I'm conscious that we will have some people on the webinar this morning that won't be familiar with MorePay, so I'll give a very brief introduction. We provide payroll and HR software as well as outsourcing services to UK businesses. We've been around since 1966 and have all the accreditations you'd expect. Our promise is to make payroll and HR easy, and here's how we do it. We've built easy software and we deliver quality outsourcing options, and all of this means worry-free compliance with businesses. On the slide, you can see some of the businesses who trust us to take care of their payroll and HR. We're also award-winning, and on this slide you can see some of the industry awards and shortlists that we've picked up over the last couple of years. Now, if you'd like to learn more about us, you can drop me a message in the Q&A panel and I can ask one of my colleagues to contact you. So moving on to our presenter for this morning, if you've joined our webinars before, then I'm sure you'll be familiar with Linda. Linda is our HR advice line manager at MorePay. She's a CIPD qualified expert in HR and employment law and has been helping MorePay customers deal with HR issues since 2010. Linda is responsible for managing the HR advice line, which operates 24/7, 365 days a year, and our HR services customers have around-the-clock support. So I'll now hand over to Linda, who will take you through the main session for today. Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Hannah. Okay, so if we move on to the presentation. Okay, so Hannah very kindly explained what I'm going to go through today, and we're going to start with what to do when you are pregnant. So an employee has a legal obligation to inform their employer that they are pregnant, and to do this they would generally get a form from the midwife. Normally this comes at around the 20-week stage. If you've ever had a baby or been part of that journey, it's generally around the second scan time when the lady is around 20 weeks. So it's called a MAP-B1 and you have to ask for it as well. Some people assume that they just get it automatically. No, you've got to ask your midwife or your doctor for a MAP-B1 form, and that then is evidence of your pregnancy. So they also have to inform us of when they want to start their maternity leave. It doesn't have to be in writing, but it does help if it is. And yeah, it depends actually what you do say in your policy. So maybe go through your maternity policy and just double check to see if you require it in writing. But it's good practice to get it in writing. So they have to ask for this maternity leave by what they call the qualifying week, which is 15 weeks before the beginning of the week the baby's due. So if you get the MAP-V1, you get the date on it, you count back 15 weeks, and that's the time when they should be telling you. Now, there are extreme circumstances where this is not possible. Sometimes people don't even know they're pregnant. Seeing as I look like an elephant, I don't know how that can happen, but some people just don't know because they don't show too much, and yeah, it becomes a surprise. I'm not sure a nice one, but it does happen. So if that's the case, you might not necessarily get a MAP-V1. But then we'd have to ask for maybe the copy of the baby's birth certificate as evidence of childbirth rather than the MAP-V1. But they happen few and far between. It's not a common occurrence. And then, as Hannah quite rightly pointed out, once we know our employee is pregnant, we need to do a health and safety risk assessment. So that's just to ensure that the baby and the mother are both okay. So that should be done as soon as you know, and we'll cover off more detail in a minute. Okay, so eligibility of maternity, entitlement for the leave and the pay. So basically, for the leave, an employee, it's a day one right, maternity leave. Like I say, some people don't know they're pregnant, start a new job, you just don't know. But the eligibility for maternity leave is just to be employed. And then, as I've already explained, they should inform us by the 15th week before the baby's born, so the qualifying week, as they call it. Like I say, if you might have a policy that might give different requirements, so double check your policy as well to make sure that that's what you ask for, because if you've got company maternity pay, you might have different measures, so just double check that's what you say, but normally it is by the time the 26 weeks technically. Okay, so once deemed eligible, i.e. if you're an employee and not a worker, because worker isn't entitled to maternity leave, they may be entitled to maternity pay or maternity allowance, but they're not always entitled to leave. So yeah, as long as they're an employee, they're entitled to 52 weeks leave, and that's broken up into 3 sections really. The first 2 sections are the main things that people think of, which is what they call OML, ordinary maternity leave, and that's 26 weeks. And then AML, which is additional maternity leave, which is the second 26 weeks. Now, there is also something called compulsory maternity leave, and that is the direct time after the baby's born. So an employee must take off 2 weeks directly after the baby's born. And if you work in a factory environment, that compulsory leave, which is what it's called, is 4 weeks. So you need to think about the type of work the employee does, and then they must either take 2 weeks off or 4 weeks off. So what do you have to do when you've got all this? So your obligation is to confirm. You have to legally confirm the maternity leave in writing. So the employer doesn't have to put it in writing to you, but you as an employer legally have to confirm the maternity leave in writing. So what you should be considering then is when's the maternity leave going to start? What have they said they're going to take? Are they going to take the full 52 weeks? Are they going to take a shorter amount and maybe change it to parental leave? What information does the employer give you? That should all be confirmed in writing back to the employee, together with any entitlement to maternity pay. Now, the earliest an employee can take maternity leave is 11 weeks before the EWC, which is the expected week of childbirth. Like I said, you'll get that from the MAP-V1 form. And it's normally in extreme circumstances people do want to start that early, but if your employee is quite unwell, they may want to start it early, and it's 11 weeks before the baby's due. Should the employee be absent with a maternity-related illness on the run-up to their maternity leave, even if they've put their application in, they've put that they want to start maybe a week before the baby's born. If they are off work with a pregnancy-related illness on the run-up to their maternity leave can be enforced at the 4 weeks before the baby's due, so at 36 weeks, we can enforce the maternity leave, even if it wasn't the employee's intention to take their leave at that time. But it's only if it is a maternity related or a pregnancy related illness. If they're off with cold or flu or broken ankle, something not connected to the baby, then it will be sick pay as normal, and then maternity leave will kick in on the date that they've already requested it. So if you're not sure whether it's maternity related, take advice, because we'll always support you to do the right thing. Okay, so maternity pay. So it sounds really complicated and a lot of people can't get their head around it. And but basically, to qualify for maternity pay, the employee must earn over the lower earnings limit, which is currently £125 per week, and they need to have 26 weeks service up to the qualifying week. So if you remember, we get the MAP B1 with a date on it, we count back 15 weeks, and then that's the qualifying week. We need to count back a further 26 weeks, and that will give you the latest the employee can be employed to qualify for maternity pay. There are lots of calculators out there that will do this for you, but yeah, if you're not sure, it's MAP B1, count back 15 weeks, and then 26 weeks prior to that. And basically what it means is they've got to be employed before they were pregnant. So that's what it means in reality. We need the MAP B1 as well for the maternity pay. Like I say, if we didn't get a MAP B1 for one reason or another, then we can ask for further evidence, i.e. birth certificate, letter from a GP, something else. If an employee is not eligible for statutory maternity pay, or maybe you've got contractual maternity pay, we need to provide them with an SMP1 form. That should be done within 7 days of them notifying us of their intention to take the leave. So once you've had that form, the application in the hand, or when maybe they've verbally told you or sent you an email, we should go back with confirmation that they're not actually entitled to maternity pay from yourselves, and that they would need the form that you're going to give them. You give them MAP B1 back. I would always take a copy so you've got it on file. Would give them MAP B1 back with the form so that they can take that to the benefits agency, and then they can apply for what they call maternity allowance, which is the government's version of SMP. So how does the pay work? It's payable. Statutory maternity pay is payable for 39 weeks in total. First 6 weeks paid at 90% of their average weekly earnings, and this is before tax, and this includes any bonuses or anything that they've got in that particular pay period. It is based on their gross pay, and you work out 90% of their average weekly earnings, which you count back, same as the entitlement, you count back from the MAP B1, you count back 15 weeks to the qualifying week, and then on the 8 weeks run up to that, or the last 2 months pay, you work out from their gross weekly earnings. So they get 9% for 6 weeks, and then the rest of the leave, which is not the leave, the rest of the pay period, which is 33 weeks, is paid at the current statutory rate, which is £187.18 a week, or it's paid at 90% of their average earnings if their average weekly earnings are less than that, but over the lower earnings limit. So just to be clear, if they earn over the £125 a week, but less than the statutory payment, which is £187.18, they would get 90% of their average earnings for the entire period. So, okay. And as I've already mentioned, statutory maternity allowance, if they've not got the entitlement to maternity pay, they take the SMP1 form to the benefits people, and they will then claim from the government. Okay, so health and safety risk assessments. Now, I'm going to be open and honest here. I'm not a health and safety expert. We have a team of people who provide that service at MorePay, but we do feel maternity, health and safety, and employment law, maternity do cross over slightly. So it's worth mentioning to you to make sure that you are following all the right rules when you have a pregnant employee. So, like I said, as soon as you know somebody's pregnant, you should be doing this maternity risk assessment. If you've already got our service, then we have a template. Depending on your work environment, it may be worth linking into health and safety to get them to assess that to make sure it's relevant to your employee. Like I say, we're not health and safety, but we can guide you in the right directions, and we do have a basic template that you can use to assess the risks. So this risk assessment should be done at the start of the pregnancy. It should be repeated at periodic times throughout the pregnancy, and it should carry on the return to work, especially if they have given birth in the last 6 months and or are breastfeeding. So yeah, you do have an obligation, legal obligation under health and safety legislation to complete this periodically through the entire period. Like I say, if you need more information on it, reach out to your health and safety advisors. If you use our service, just press number 1 on the telephone line and you'll get through to the team. If not, then maybe let us know and we can quote you for the service. So, things to consider during this risk assessment. So, like I said, you've got to revisit it constantly throughout the pregnancy, and even following the pregnancy, if the employee comes back early, maybe they give some of their leave over to their partner, so they don't take the full 52 weeks off. If they've given birth within 6 months, that needs to be done, and if they're still breastfeeding, it needs to be done. Like I said, health and safety is different to employment law. We're not experts, but what we ought to do know is if you don't provide a safe working environment for your employee, then repercussions that could be criminal. So in employment law, you'd normally see maybe a civil claim at worst and tribunal claim. Health and safety can be a criminal offence. So there are repercussions for not completing these assessments, and they're quite serious. So what happens if you do the risk assessment and the role or the workplace seems too dangerous for the employee, or the work seems too dangerous? Maybe it's very heavy, maybe there's a lot of chemicals involved. What do we do? Well, we need to try and make the workplace as safe as possible. If that's not possible, we would look for an alternative role for them within the organisation. And if not, then we would have to potentially put them on paid suspension until the maternity leave will start, because, if we can't provide them with a safe working environment, then legally they can't come to work. So maybe I've seen this happen in practice quite a few times, especially maybe in a factory environment. So you maybe train them up on a different job that doesn't require exposure to the risk, or maybe, if you've got an office as well attached to your workstation, the previous workstation, then maybe you can look at transferring them into an office for a period. I would always try and look for something for them to do, because other than that, you have to pay them on full pay for the remainder of the pregnancy. Like I say, if you're not sure, take advice from health and safety. Okay, so April last year, we had new protection come in for pregnant and recently given birth people. And that is in the form of the Protection from Redundancy Act. It came in on the 6th of April last year. And yeah, it's changed things slightly. So if you're used to pregnancy and redundancy, you've dealt with it in the past, basically all it's done is enhance that so that people have a longer period of protection. So they used to just have it while they were pregnant, but now they have it from 18 months from the date of birth of the child. So yeah, it goes a lot further than the previous protection. Again, it covers people who have adopted as well. It's not just people who've given birth. And it also is extended to people who take 6 weeks or more of shared parental leave. yeah, again, it's still 18 months, so it's worth considering. If you're looking to make changes within your workforce and you have somebody who is on maternity leave, adoption leave, or shared parental leave. So how do we manage this in practical terms? So we should consult, as with all redundancies. As soon as you reasonably know there's going to be a redundancy, that people should be consulted, and that's everyone. So you've got to consider people off on maternity leave and long-term sick. People forget people on long-term sick. It's just worth noting that really you should consult with everyone who is going to be affected by the redundancy. They should be invited into meetings, they should be given the chance to fully participate in the process, and if their employee is at risk of redundancy, they should be entitled to a suitable alternative vacancy. Now, that suitable alternative vacancy should be offered to the person on the family-friendly leave over anyone else at risk. This is what we call the golden ticket rule. So if it is a suitable alternative, then it needs to be offered over the people that are not on family-related leave. Now, if you're not sure how that will work in reality, maybe you need the role before your maternity leave comes back from maternity leave or shared parental leave or adoption leave, just give us a call and we'll talk about the practicalities in more detail. But it's a tricky thing, and it has generally been there for many years, but it's just been extended, so it's the full 18 months now. Okay, so what else to consider? We've got to consider keeping in touch days, and reasonable contact with your employees while they are off on maternity leave. So kit days are up to 10 days that an employee can work during their maternity leave without affecting their maternity leave or pay. So, can employee demand a kit day or a keeping in touch day? The answer is no. Kit days need to be agreed with the employer and the employee. So the same as an employee can't demand to work a keeping in touch day, you cannot yourself insist on your employee working a keeping in touch day. And I would generally agree the arrangements for payment of these prior to somebody going off on maternity leave, just so that you both know what to expect. Even if an employee just works 1 hour for a keeping in touch day, it's counted as one of the 10 days. So that's worth noting. And yeah, some companies don't actually pay keeping in touch days, but they would give a day in lieu when the employee gets back to work. But like I say, that should be agreed prior to them going off, just that everyone's expectations are met. Reasonable contact. So what's reasonable? I think we've all got different opinions on what's reasonable. Again, we can agree what's reasonable contact before the employee goes off. So maybe people would want monthly contact, maybe bi-monthly. People might not want any contact at all. Just, speak to your staff, find out what they want, and then make a note, diary entries, so you don't forget to contact people. What's really important is if there's anything happening in the workplace while somebody's off, we need to inform them. So if there's a newsletter that always goes out, we need to check the best contact details to send that to. We need to let them know if there's a Christmas party, summer event, if there's anything going on that they would normally be invited to had they been in work, then lines of communication should remain open so that they don't get left out, because we can face serious repercussions if people feel like they're being left out because they're on maternity leave. If you've got any vacancies that come up, people should be communicated with about that. Maybe you're looking to promote somebody internally in your team, maybe you're looking for a team leader and you've got somebody on maternity leave. They should get that invite to apply for it at the same time as everyone else and have the same opportunities as everyone else. And yeah, quite clearly, as I've already said, it can cause serious consequences if you don't communicate. So, which is not limited to sex discrimination. There are lots of problems with not communicating with people. So just be careful. Now, occasionally you do see somebody facing disciplinary action when they're on maternity leave. Now, I would generally avoid it if you can. And if things get too old as well, allegations get too old, you've not spoken to your employee, it's difficult to address it later on down the line anyway. So I would say if there is something you need to discuss with your employee, you could use a kit day to investigate it, but I would only do it if you have to. If you don't have to, then I would strongly encourage you not to do it. Take advice before doing it, because it can be quite tricky to discipline people when they're on maternity leave. Conversely, if somebody's committed an act of gross misconduct and it's a very serious allegation, then I don't think we can ignore it. So take advice and we'll support you through the process, or speak to your HR team. Okay, so my next topic is something close to my heart. It's something that is always, as it has been, a bugbear. I think we get the most calls on the advice line because of this, and it can cause serious repercussions, is annual leave and maternity. You think in this day and age people would know that employees still accrue annual leave during maternity, but strangely enough, not everyone's been through that. Maybe you've got I don't know, most of your employees are male and you've never touched it, or there's maybe you've just never had a maternity person, but some people are still shocked to find out that you still accrue all your annual leave while you're on holiday. While you're on holiday, it's not a holiday, trust me, been there twice, it's not a holiday. While you're on maternity leave, what I always say is sit down with the employee before they go off and discuss how you're going to manage the leave. Because they're generally off for up to a year, it's quite a lot of annual leave to manage, and you generally cross over an annual leave year. It's rare. I don't even think I've ever known one that's just gone off on the 1st of January and come back then the next holiday year. So what I would generally advise is people tag some leave on before they go on maternity leave. So maybe anything that you've accrued up to the point that you go off, and maybe a part of what they would accrue while they're off, and then maybe tag the rest on at the end, and then maybe come back with a number of holidays to use during the remaining holiday year, just so that we don't have a huge backlog when they come back. So annual leave should be carried over if the employee hasn't had reasonable time to take it. So say somebody came back in December with 28 days annual leave, and there's not the time to take it in the time that they're back at work, that should be allowed to be carried over in the year. However, if they do come back and there's plenty of time, and as long as you warn them that they need to take that leave, before the end of the holiday year, take advice, because it can be a bit tricky, but if they haven't taken it, they're back at work maybe 6 months and just not taking it, and you've reminded them to take it and they don't take it, you could still use the use it or lose it rule, depending on your contract. So maybe just double check what you say you do first before doing anything, and also take advice on the particular circumstances. So the same as you accrue holidays, you accrue bank holidays. Normally they're part of the contract of employment, and any bank holidays should be given when an employee returns back to work. It's important to note as well that people can't take holidays during maternity leave. We can't take 2 types of statutory leave at once, and we can't pay holidays. Holidays is time to be taken for rest and relaxation, and not for payment. So if your employee just wants you to pay their holidays out and then they want to come back to work full time, they just want the payment, that can't happen. It shouldn't happen. In holidays, the only time really we can pay holidays is if they are above statutory minimum, but that would only be a small portion of it, or if they are leaving the organisation, so that's when holidays can be paid. Okay, so return to work. So what does that look like? So as I already described, maternity leave is broken up into two sections: OML, AML, ordinary maternity leave, additional maternity leave. So if an employee returns to work during or at the end of their OML, they have the right to return to the same job on the same terms and conditions as if they've not been away from work. An employee who returns after AML or has taken at least 4 weeks of parental leave on top of their OML, so that maybe they've had OML, transferred their maternity leave over to a partner and maybe taken some parental leave, they're entitled to the same job unless it's no longer reasonably practicable. Now, what does that mean in reality? Then it could mean a number of things. So if you're thinking of changing roles for somebody while they're even in the AML period, take advice, go through the reasons, and we'll support you with whether that's the right thing to do or not. Because, you know, if you're just putting somebody in a new job because the person who did it during the maternity leave was just better than them at it, you face a potential face a claim, discrimination and unfair dismissal, and it's it'd be expensive at tribunal, so I would definitely avoid that if possible. Okay, so bonuses and pay rises. So how is that affected by maternity leave? So let's start with pay rises. If any of you work in payroll, you will be familiar with the Alabaster case. So what that says is if you have a pay rise after the maternity pay has been calculated, before the employee returns to work, then the SMP needs to be recalculated to include the pay rise. Now, I'm not a payroll expert, but more pay out. So if you have more pay payroll, they will work that out for you. But it's just something from a HR perspective you need to be aware of. Tell your payroll that there's been a pay rise for that individual while they're off on maternity leave or after the SMP has already been calculated, and they will recalculate the maternity pay. So how does that affect company maternity pay? Well, you would generally have a policy that would confirm what you do. There isn't a legal obligation to backdate the pay rise, but there may be a contractual or a moral obligation. So again, if you do have contractual or enhanced maternity pay and the employee has a pay rise, or would have had a pay rise should they've been in work, then take advice and we'll support you through what to do. Okay, let's get me a drink, won't be a second. Okay, so maternity leave and bonuses. So basically, if a bonus is considered pay, then the bonus wouldn't be paid during maternity leave. So if it's remuneration, i.e. pay, you as an employer will not be obliged to pay it to the employee during the maternity leave. However, if it's a contractual benefit, you'll have to pay it to the employee despite them being on maternity leave. If an employee begins the maternity leave through a bonus year, which, as we know, people go off on maternity leave when it suits them during the pregnancy, we would potentially have to prorate any bonus that is considered remuneration as part of that process. And when calculating the prorated amount, you would also need to pay it for not only the time before they went on maternity leave that the bonus reflects, but the 2 weeks compulsory leave or 4 weeks compulsory leave should they work in a factory environment. Any bonus payments just must be made as usual had the employee not been on maternity leave. So it would just go through payroll as normal. Right, so pitfalls. Now there are a number of pitfalls, and I think maternity is one of the most scariest topics for an employment law advisor given it has far-reaching implications. So what are common pitfalls? So lack of communication. I did stress this earlier, that I do see cases come up where people just weren't advised of a bonus. People weren't advised of a party, they weren't advised about, I don't know, changes in the workforce. So, communication is key, because this is what causes the most claims that we see on the advice line. So like I said, agree in advance communication, and make sure you diary in reminders to remind you to contact them, because we're all busy, and it is easy to, out of sight, out of mind, and then you don't mean to leave people out, but it can happen. So again, it's another pitfall is poor handling of performance or conduct issues. So maybe somebody's performance is connected to the pregnancy, and maybe you don't link that up, and maybe we discipline somebody and then they link that up. That can be a real problem. So it should be considered if you've taken disciplinary action or performance conduct related action, capability related action against the employee, just to consider, do I need to make these adjustments because of the pregnancy? Is this something I should be taking disciplinary advice on? Again, I can't stress enough, take advice, speak to us, we'll support you through the process. And another common pitfall is no clear return to work processes. So we failed to plan for somebody coming back to work, and the employee just turns up, and you've had somebody sitting in the desk while they've been away, and there's no plan to get them back to work. That can cause upset, and it's unnecessary. Diary in, make sure you make the relevant arrangements, welcome your employee back to work. If there have been any changes, and I'm sure you would have consulted through the kit days, make sure you meet with the employee on return to work just to consult further, just to make sure everyone's okay with the changes. And also make sure that any alternative work that has been offered as part of any process while they've been off, make sure they're not suffering a detriment as a result of being on maternity, because that is a huge no-no and can cause you a headache from an employment law perspective. Other common pitfalls are confusion around annual leave. So, like I say, if somebody is thinking they can be paid the annual leave, this should all be discussed way up front. Employees shouldn't come back thinking, yeah, I can take. Actually, I had a live case the other day where an employee just thought they could increase their working days by 1 day and just have that 1 day's holiday paid to them each week, but they didn't want to permanently change the terms and conditions. They just wanted to be paid that day's holiday a week for they had that many holidays. It would have taken forever basically to get their way through the holidays. So manage your expectations early, upfront, so that we all know what's going to happen to them holidays before the maternity leave, after maternity leave. And people, like I've said already, people can say that they've had limited support, but make sure that you welcome back. Maybe you've got new staff while they've been away and they don't know who they are in the team, so make sure these introductions happen so that they don't feel left out. And then also consider fairly any flexible working requests. Flexible working requests will also impact on holidays as well. I know I've not discussed that in any form of detail, but if somebody works 5 days a week prior to going off on maternity leave, their holidays will accrue at that rate during the maternity leave. And if they're going to come back working 3 days a week, then they will have a lot of holidays to use and not as much time to take it. So I would always consider the effects of holidays on flexible working requests as well. Maybe your employee is quite upfront about what they want to do after their maternity leave, so you can plan that in advance. If they're not sure, maybe discuss it with them on a kit day, but make sure you support and follow the fair process and take advice. So, sickness, absence and pregnancy. Like I said already, employers must consider reasonable adjustments for people who are pregnant. So, you know, you need to make sure they've got a safe working environment, and failure to make these adjustments can lead to a claim under the Equality Act. So you need to be supportive, you need to be welfare focused, and the employee will still be required to submit fit notes if they're off for more than a week, even if it's related to a pregnancy related illness. So just make sure you are being fair and reasonable, treating everyone the same, and considering, is this sickness pregnancy related? If yes, do I need to take more care? The answer would be yes. And just an important point to note that pregnancy related absence shouldn't be counted towards any absence triggers. So maybe you've got a process where you discipline after 3 absences, you should remove pregnancy related absence from that trigger point. Or if you use the Bradford factor, any pregnancy related absence shouldn't be included in that Bradford factor calculation.
Thank you, Linda. I'm sure you'll all agree that there is an awful lot to consider when it comes to maternity. We'll now move into the Q&A session. So if you do have any questions, just keep dropping them into the question panel and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. So Linda, first question. We have an employee who is 30 weeks pregnant, but no risk assessment has been done. Our HR manager advised it needs to be completed by her line manager, which is not feasible. Can you confirm that someone else in the HR team can complete the risk assessment?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that line manager. It can be anyone. If you've got a health and safety advisor on site, you know, they might be a good person to do it. Just, it doesn't necessarily have to be the line manager. Somebody who's familiar with the employee, the work environment, the type of work they do, can do the risk assessment. Not sure, speak to health and safety.
Thanks, Linda. So next question, how does the golden ticket rule work if you have more protected employees than suitable alternative roles?
So you just have to go through a scoring criteria with the protected employees. There is case law to support some cases of making making people with pregnancy related protection redundant. It doesn't mean you can't make them redundant. It just means that we have to follow more process and go through a few more hoops if that's what we need. So it depends on the case, but if you want 4 people and you've got 5 with maternity protection, then you will just have to fairly score between them.
Thank you. Next question, for kit days, should a full day be paid as per contract regardless of the hours worked within the day? So if they only work for 2 hours, are you still paying for the full day?
So this is what you should agree with your employee up front to manage expectations. So you can, unless your policy says otherwise, just pay for the time worked. It should be agreed so that everyone is fully aware of what's going to happen. But yeah, it's whatever you agree between you. If somebody works a full day, they should be paid a full day's pay. If somebody works an hour or 2, then ideally they get paid an hour or 2, but it should be agreed up front.
Thanks, Linda. We have had a few questions around kit days, actually. I know that they can cause some confusion. So the next question is, in our organisation, we pay enhanced maternity pay for 20 weeks. Can an employee do a kit day during this period, as it might curtail their maternity pay since they're already being paid in full? Or should we agree to pay these after the 20 weeks? Or should we just say don't do any kit days for the first 20 weeks for that reason?
So if somebody works a kit day and it just happens to be at a time where they are on a higher rate of pay, then I suppose that is just what it is. I would check what your policy, check what you say you do, agree with the employee. But with a kit day, it can just be So I don't know if any of you joined our webinar yesterday, but we've got changes coming in tomorrow on the advice team. So we're all in work. And if I had somebody off on maternity leave, they would have to come in tomorrow because we've got a brand new system coming in. So things happen when they happen. And if you need that person to come in and experience a change as it happens, then a kit day needs to be utilised when it needs to be utilised. Sorry, that's just a test. It's not the great day to do a webinar when we've got a fire test. So yeah, if the employee agrees to work a kit day and it just so happens to be on a day when they're already getting more money, then that is just what it is. But if you're not sure, just take advice and check what your policy says.
One more on kit days before we move on to something else. So what if an employee comes in to visit their team, potentially with the new baby, just to say hello? That doesn't count as a kit day, does it?
No. Kit days have to be agreed with both sides. And it's you're agreeing work, you're not agreeing. So I have had the pleasure of having one of my team have a baby, a couple of my team members having babies. And they've brought the lovely bundles of joy in to meet me, and they've asked, can I come into the office and show baby around? Of course you can. That is not a kit day. That is just you coming in to see everyone, say hello. Maybe you're missing people. I don't know about you, and I think everyone's different, but I think I was a little bit left out when I was on my last maternity leave. I was a bit bored and missing out on the workplace at times. So sometimes it is nice to come in and see your colleagues just to say hi. It isn't necessarily a kit day.
Thanks, Linda. So next question, how would you deal with carrying out a health and safety risk assessment on pregnant employees who mainly work from home?
Well, like I said, it's a health and safety question, but what I would do is I would probably go and do a visit, a home visit maybe, and go through it with them. Or I know what there's a lot of self-assessment goes on really when in the new world, in the post-COVID world where we've got a lot of hybrid working, but you probably have to speak to health and safety for more information on whether that can be done remotely. But I probably, from a HR perspective, would go out and see my employee and risk assess them in person if I can. Like I say, speak to health and safety if you've got that scenario, and they should be able to help you more.
So next question, an employee is returning on a phased return to work after 26 weeks of maternity leave. Could you please advise if this will impact annual leave allowance?
So it depends what you say you do in your policy. By a phased return, are we changing? It depends on the situation. If we've changed terms and conditions of employment, i.e., we're 5-day-week worker, and we're changing terms and conditions of employment to say that we're going to be something else for a while before coming back in 5 days a week. If it's permanent change to terms and conditions, then it will affect holiday. If it's just a gradual phasing in of somebody, like maybe they've been off sick and they come back and work their way up to working full-time hours, it won't necessarily affect holidays. They should still get their contractual entitlement. It all depends on the contract of employment and what you say you do. And if it's not a permanent change, then it shouldn't affect the holidays.
Thank you, Linda. Right, we've just got time for a couple more questions. So moving on to the next question. We have a pregnant employee who is currently in the last month of her probation period. She has been off sick for 2 weeks due to pregnancy-related illness, which has reduced the time available to assess her performance. Are we legally allowed to extend her probation period in order to fairly evaluate her performance? And what considerations should we be aware of to ensure that we're not at risk of discrimination?
So what I would consider is, what have you done with other employees? So have you had people who have been in the probation period, been off sick, and you've extended the probation to take into account normal sickness? So if you've always done that and therefore it could potentially be fair, then it may be worth considering. If you've never done that and it's not normal, and this is the first time you're considering it because she's off on sickness, then it may be risky. I think we'd probably need more information. Maybe give us a call on the advice line if you've got our service, and we'll talk you through next steps. It depends what's going on with the individual as well, and what's wrong with the performance, if there is something wrong. I think that sounds like there potentially is an issue, and whether you already discussed the issue prior to them going off sick, or is it only coming out now? With employment law, it's not just what's going on, it's how it looks. And if you never discuss performance related issues with them prior to this, and all of a sudden we're doing it with a pregnancy related absence, it will come with risk.
Thanks, Linda. So last question is, I've got somebody on maternity leave at the moment, and they've let me know that they do want to return to work, but they don't want to return to the same role. What options do we have there?
So an employee doesn't have an automatic right to change role on the return from maternity leave. So we have to consider applications for flexible working. I'm thinking this is not necessarily an application for flexible working. This sounds to me like they want to do something different. I think it would depend on the needs of the business and what they want. You'd have to bring them in and listen to what they're asking for. I've seen it where people come back after maternity leave wanting to step down from a role because maybe it would be difficult to manage with their current lifestyle. It would just depend on what and why, but there's no automatic legal obligation to give them a different role on return from maternity leave. You need to consider what, why, where, when, all the good stuff.
Thanks, Linda. That was a brilliant Q&A session. Now, I'll point you in the direction of a few resources before we do finish up today. So if you've not been in our Knowledge Centre before, you can access it via the homepage on our website, and in here you can access all of our blogs, our guides, our upcoming webinars, and there's a wealth of information there on pregnancy and maternity. So if you are looking for any more information, then have a look there. Everything is free to download. And in terms of our services, if you would like to find out more, there will be a pop-up form that appears on your screen once we close the webinar today, and you can register your interest here and one of my colleagues can make contact with you. As we've mentioned about the advice line, it runs 24/7, 365 days a year. So no matter when an HR issue crops up, best practice employment law advice is always available over the phone anytime. And it's delivered by our highly experienced team of qualified experts. I've also included a link here to our guide to total HR management. So we believe that when combined with expert HR support, HR software can transform workforce management, allowing businesses to stay compliant, reduce costs, and enhance overall productivity. So if you would like to find out a little bit more, just click on the link and you can access the guide there. So that is everything from our side today. We will be sending out a copy of the slides from this morning and also a copy of the recording, so you will have that to refer back to. I hope you found the session useful. Thank you to Linda for giving us such a comprehensive overview. There was a wealth of information in there. And I hope you all have a great day. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.